Good evening, and thank you for everyone turning up today and taking part in this very special workshop for the PPL Momentum Accelerator in Wales. Just going to kick things off, and this is for the newly launched PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund for Wales. My name is Kwame Sappho, and I'm the Grants and Programs Manager at the Foundation, and one of the main points of contact for the fund. The PRS Foundation is the UK's leading charitable funder of new music and talent development. And since its creation in 2000, PRS Foundation has given more than 41 million in impactful and timely grants to over 8,100 new music initiatives. This workshop has been set up to help you navigate the new PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales, which has been crafted to assist music creators and industry professionals in Wales, aiming to break to a national level of activity and then onto our larger UK-wide scheme, PPL Momentum Fund. The panel will last for approximately 1 hour, followed by a short Q&A session. For anyone who would like to have their question at the end translated from Welsh into English for the panel, we have a translator with us this evening. I'm going to be joined on the panel by Simon Parton, Anton Owen Hicks, Dave Ball, and I'll hand you over to the panel so they can introduce themselves. Can we start with yourself, please, Simon?
Yeah, hi, my name's Simon Parton. I'll first off apologise in the sense that I'm juggling this and the toddler. We've had some childcare issues, so if you can hear Peppa Pig in the background, that's what's keeping her occupied at the moment. So if I go off camera, it's because I'm chasing her, making sure she doesn't run upstairs. But yeah, so I work as a freelancer within, yeah, hi. And I work for BBC Wales and Horizons. I'm going to mute myself and occupy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Simon. Dave?
Yeah, hi, how you doing? Thankfully, my 7-year-old is less running around screaming these days and just hammers my instruments instead. I'm Dave Ball. I'm the Music Development Manager for Creative Wales, which is an agency within Welsh Government. Basically, we're there to look after everything across creative industries, film and TV, digital media, and of course music, which is me and my little team of 3 merry men.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dave. And Anton?
So Anton Owen Hicks, Arts Council of Wales. I'm one of the arts development team, and I cover a lot with music activity. I'm involved in our music strategy group. I'm currently covering some work for Lisa Matthews-Jones, who normally covers music as a portfolio manager, but she's engaged in other work currently, so I'm covering some of that work off, which includes this PRS Sbardun Accelerator scheme.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anton. Okay, so I appreciate everyone's multitasking this evening with different activities running simultaneously. So I'll be very succinct in my questioning, as it were. I'll start with yourself, please, Simon, for the benefit of those who are still struggling to kind of identify where they sit as a musician in the grand scheme of things. Do you mind just explaining who should be coming to Horizons Gorillion for support?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone unaware, Horizons is a partnership between BBC Wales and the Arts Council of Wales. And basically we're all about investing in platforming original music talent in Wales, anything contemporary really. And we try and be as open door as possible. We are keen to hear from and help and platform and talk to and have an open dialogue with as many artists across Wales as possible. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Anyone making music in Wales, really.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's take me, for example. I'm not going to put on a Welsh accent and embarrass anyone here, but I'm a Welsh music creator. What's the process of me engaging with Horizons and bridging that relationship?
Yeah, so we're really active on social media. So across all platforms, we're at Horizons Cymru. So we kind of have an open door policy in terms of, drop us a DM or drop us a message on anything and just keep us posted on what you're doing. You can get us at horizons@bbc.co.uk. I'll put it in the chat. And that's kind of a good open door policy for that. And then also we have our Launchpad fund, which happens annually. We haven't kind of announced the specific dates of that this year, but that will be happening later in the year. And that's a great way to access financial support from both Horizons and the Arts Council.
Brilliant. I'm going to return to Launchpad in a second. So Horizons, is that for a specific kind of level of artist, music creator? Is it early level or established?
Yeah, it kind of bridges the gap between that early level and established, really. But again, we're all about shouting about the success stories from Wales, really, and that can be someone who's just starting out, and that can be someone who is selling out venues across the UK. Yeah, to kind of it's a tricky one to pinpoint, but we're all about all things Welsh music, really. So yeah, if you are just starting out and you've got a single and it's getting radio play, or you're ready to go, we want to hear about you, really. Brilliant.
And what is the sort of I guess the maximum grant amount someone is likely to kind of factor into their budget if they wanted financial support from your platform?
Yeah, so the Launchpad fund usually has a cap of £2,000 that you can apply for, but that doesn't mean that you have to apply for that specific amount. You can apply for less. It's just capped at 2,000, and it's really nice to kind of see the range of projects and proposals that we get through Launchpad. And it can be, like last year, funds ranged from like 300 quid to buy cases for musical instruments to £2,000 to help a PR campaign for an album. So it's really kind of, it bridges both those kind of scales of things. And yeah, it's as the name implies, I guess it's kind of about launching you into that next level, really. So we're looking at artists that are maybe at that tipping point of, they've started out something really good, and this will just be that little bit of boost to get them to that next level, really.
Brilliant. I think I'm going to touch on that tipping point question from a Welsh perspective towards the end, and get everyone's sort of take on how they define that. I think people will be very interested to kind of understand that dynamic. Over the course of, I guess, a year or funding year, how many music creators are you likely to support, Simon?
So it's usually, it happens that the fund opens once a year. Last year we funded, I think it was around 50 artists, and previous years it's usually 40. So it's between 40 and 50 artists. And yeah, it's a range of projects. It's a range of financial support. Like I said, it can be £200 for something, or the full whack to £2,000. But yeah, I would say between 40 and 60 a year is who we support and how many we support.
That's brilliant. And I think that's really sort of encouraging for any music creators in Wales who may have just their eyes set on one specific fund. There's other funds for earlier stages that have the capacity to support more if needs be in that crucial stage of their development. So that's really kind of interesting to hear.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm going to move on to Anton now. The Arts Council of Wales is the funding partner for PPL Momentum Accelerator. And can you tell us a bit more about what you do and your relationship with the PRS Foundation?
Yeah, okay. So, Arts Council of Wales obviously we're a funding organisation. We have we distribute lottery funding, and at the moment that's only through one particular scheme as an open fund called Create, and that is for the creation of new work. It can be about R&D as well. We do R&D projects, research and development, also towards production and touring support. With PRS Foundation, we have a sort of a few strands of activity really in supporting the music industry in Wales. I think it started initially with the International Showcase Fund. So we contribute to the International Showcase Fund for bands who are selected for showcasing South by Southwest, Showcase Scotland, Breakout West, you know, those kind of international showcase events, WOMEX. And there's funding available if you have been selected, in, you know, to enable you to get to those showcases. So we also support the Beyond Borders scheme, which is about commissioning and creating new work in partnership with artists, composers and musicians from other parts of the UK. Let me see, what else do we do? Yeah, there's also, we've just recently launched Power Up in Wales. So that's really exciting new development, really focusing on mobile music and the development of supporting Black creators, musicians, and within the music industry as well in Wales. So that's, I think there are going to be some sessions in the autumn, some kind of masterclass sessions, if you like, online that people can sign up for. And then there's this the Accelerator scheme, which we're launching now, obviously, Spartin, you know, which is really, I suppose, we were really looking at being able to address the gap between things like Launchpad and Horizons, and then Momentum, which is a much larger grant fund, and the funding available is much larger, and there wasn't really anything in between. We used to run our own music industry development fund through the Arts Council, and that ceased to exist a few years ago. So really this is about, you know, looking at where we can partner with the music industry experts, really, and provide that funding at different stages of people's careers.
Brilliant. So I mean, from an East London perspective, the Arts Council of Wales and PPL Foundation, we go way back, yeah?
We go way back.
So what would you say is the long-term goal of PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales? Because this is the first time we've actually appeared in the nations. We've previously ran it in the regions. It currently runs in Yorkshire and Liverpool City region. And I guess the idea there was to sort of bolster and support regional talent and incubate it as well, and make sure that there isn't a drain of resources in that part of the country. What has been your sort of thinking behind long-term what Accelerator can do for the Wales music industry? Yeah,
so I mean, like I said a bit earlier, I suppose, you know, we recognise that there's definitely a gap in the support that's available. I think you know, we also recognise that the music industry in Wales is less developed than it is in other parts of the UK, obviously, especially London, but you know, other parts of the UK in general. I think there's quite a lack of infrastructure to support artists, management agents, etc. in that area. So I think we're really wanting to you know, offer this as a developmental opportunity to plug that gap, and hopefully enable artists to really move towards the possibility of momentum funding, if you like, in the future, to really strengthen the music industry infrastructure in Wales. Yeah, just offer that opportunity really for really, you know, emerging artists, you know, to develop their careers and take their careers to the next step.
Brilliant, thank you, Anton. I want to bounce this between yourself, Dave, and potentially yourself, Simon, as well. We spoke about the early careers in the beginning with the platform Horizons, Gwellian, and there's also much more widely known the PPL Momentum Fund from the PRS Foundation, which offers timely support for music creators between 5,000 and 15,000. Can you explain from your perspective, just in general, working on the ground in Wales, what you sort of identify as someone who is in that real frustrating space? They don't sit in they don't reach close enough to the tipping point of a PPL Momentum Fund, and there hasn't yet been sort of the development of a scheme like this. What are they sort of demonstrating in their, either their music creation or as an industry professional? What are they sort of demonstrating to you from your perspective? I'll start with you, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like yourself, Kwame, I'm on the panels for the when we have the momentum panels, and I think as well as that, I do a lot of talking to artists, as well as their managers and the labels when they're putting together momentum applications, and answer a lot of questions from people asking, am I in the right place for momentum? Have I got a chance of getting it, essentially? Which are the right questions to ask? And I think it is difficult sometimes, because especially across genres, where your tipping point sits, it does depend on what you do, which bit of the music industry you're in, sometimes where in Wales you're in. Obviously, the language as well changes some things. And I think one of the first things, I mean, we've within Creative Wales, we've been putting funding into momentum since 2018. What we found, particularly at that stage, early 2018, especially compared to now, was that the people who applied at that point, it was mostly sort of folk trad, a little bit of indie. And I think there was a sense at that stage of, well, if I'm a rapper, or if I'm a metal act, or if I'm doing really out there EDM stuff, then they're not going to want to do it because it's not mainstream. And I think there was a sense then that a fund like Momentum was for mainstream commercial potential artists. It was for acts who might get played on Radio 1 or might get that mainstream attention. And I think what we've seen over that period of coming up on sort of 6 years now that we've been coming up on 5 years now that we've been working with PRS on this, is that I think that narrative has changed. We've had people like Magugu get it. We've had Juice Menace get it. We've recently had Kim Or Tongue get it. Venom Prison, the death metal act from Newport, have had it. Florence Black and Those Damn Crows were both sort of classic rock side of things. And I think, as well as quite a few great indie bands like Tsunami and Adwaith have had it. So there is that blend. And I think one of the things that I've really sort of worked on trying to get over to people is that the fund itself is open to anyone. It is there, and it will fund as long as you can evidence that the project you're requesting and the money you're asking for to do that project is going to take what you're doing from where you are now up to a new level. There isn't a specific line for what that level has to be necessarily. It just needs to be that I'm currently here with my audience numbers, with my streaming numbers, with my press, and if we can have 7,000, 10,000, 12,000, up to 15,000 to spend on, working with a particular producer, or recording in a particular studio, or going out on tour with and playing a particular type of venue, then we can get to that next level. When we supported Nia Wynn, that helped to get her out on a tour with on a second tour with Paul Weller, and feel comfortable that she was able to really boss those stages. The work we did with James and Nicole Gunn recently got him in with a producer called Adrian Bushby, who'd worked with the Foo Fighters and stuff like that. They've now signed to I've completely forgotten the name of the record company now, but they just signed Stone Gossard's label then. just signed to Ven Records with Stone Gossard, and that happened because they got played on a Seattle radio station, which picked it up because it had that American rock radio sound, which came from Momentum funding the Adrian Busby work. So it just depends where you are. I mean, Venom Prison were a great example, I think, in the sense of their, as you would expect as a death metal act, their streaming numbers and their social followers were on the lower end of what you would typically look at as being a Momentum ready act. But within their niche, they were on the main stage at Bloodstock Festival. They were playing Download. They were being featured. They were front cover of Metal Hammer. So within their genre, they were clearly at a tipping point. And I think that's the big learning thing. The biggest thing I see when I'm looking at the applications is you've got to be able to evidence why you're at a tipping point, and saying, if you can provide me with the resource to do this, I can get to there. And as long as there's a clear how one is going to lead to the other, then that makes it a good application. And that's something we can then work with. So I don't know. I don't know if that's answered the question.
No,
I've just gone off.
No, that's brilliant, Dave. I'm used to it, mate. No, that's a brilliant way, and I think it's a nice segue into that elusive concept of tipping point, which I find a lot of applicants struggle to articulate, because I think from the applicant's perspective, they believe that there is a right answer, and the right answer is the only one which makes sense to them. I think for a lot of the Welsh music creators coming in, they need to think long and hard and just bullet point everything that they've done up until now. And by that definition, if they've hit a brick wall, then I guess that's their tipping point. If you've achieved the gigs and the press and the radio and all that stuff, and you've hit a kind of like a stumbling block, then it might appear that you've hit your tipping point. Even if, I mean, the one thing which can be quite dangerous for a music creator within a space is you don't know what the resources available to your competition. So you can't look at another band who might have tons of money or a studio that they can use for free and so on and so forth. So you have to sort of apply it within your own application to yourself. It also, I want to double down on David's point of how important it is to kind of flesh out your plan. You have to exude confidence in your application to convince the panel that there is going to be a return on the investment as well, which is quite important. That will obviously better your chances in the decision panels. Simon, you've obviously worked with bands and so on and so forth, and you've kind of been on the up. How difficult do you think it has been to sort of find those resources and really sort of justify the need for help, if there was sort of funding bodies around that time? Like how difficult has it been? I'm trying to kind of get you to articulate your story, because I believe that some of the applicants watching might empathize with that situation.
Yeah, totally. So for context, so I work freelance in Wales, and I also kind of help manage some artists and help, write some applications. Sorry, my toddler's throwing stuff around. Hello. I'll try and keep it succinct. Yeah, it's tricky, and it's definitely worth considering timing and making sure that you've got like a team around you, making sure that you've just got all of your chickens and eggs in order, if that's the saying, I'm not sure, but like, and it kind of extends to Launchpad as well. It's like the applications that we see coming in, we know when someone's just been like, oh yeah, I'm just going to apply for £2,000 because that's free £2,000 I can get. When it's really like considered and thought out, and it's like, I need this to get here, I'm at this point and this is going to get me here, that's going to help. And I was a musician myself, and I remember applying for Launchpad and PRS stuff and doing it and thinking, yeah, this is it, this is my time, I'm going to get it. And now in reflection, looking back, it really wasn't my time, and it really wasn't, I understand why I didn't get it, because I hadn't hit those checkpoints that the bands that were successful we're getting. So I think there's two things that I would take away from it, is that if you're applying and you don't get it, don't think, oh, well, I'm never, ever going to get it. I'll never apply again. Always apply if you think that it's right. And also, yeah, just make sure that it is timing wise correct. I think, and yeah, just making sure that you've got like a good, strong team and vision and plan, I think, is the main thing. Like I always say to artists, have a 2-year, 3-year plan. Think about where you're going. Why is now the time? Why should it, you might do your plan, get to the end of it and think, oh yeah, actually, maybe it makes sense to go for that fund next year once we've got all of these things in place. Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on a child and trying to answer, but I hope that made sense.
That was perfect. I admire your multitasking. Brilliant stuff. I just want to borrow you for one other point. So you mentioned that you got to a point where retrospectively you could actually assess and say, okay, well, maybe I wasn't at that tipping point. Was that a case of you having your team around you who could kind of give you maybe a holistic sort of perspective as to where you were at? Because what maybe some music creators might struggle with is to self-analyze and self-critique where they're at in their own sort of trajectory. Is that why you would say that it's important to have objective a viewpoint around you?
Yeah, totally. I think that, again, like I say the word team loosely, it doesn't have to be like an official agency or management team. It can literally just be like trusted mates or other musicians. And I always suggest to people writing applications, like show other people that are writing applications. I know you're going for the same pot, but like it's always good bouncing ideas off each other. And yeah, trusted people to get that objective view of what you're doing, I think is always really, really handy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. I think it's important for me to mention the differences between PPL Momentum and PPL Momentum Accelerator in Wales. Outside of obviously our website, prsfoundation.com, which has our eligibility and guidance there, PPL Momentum, which we internally call Big PPL Momentum Fund, is one which is nationwide, and it involves all the nations, it involves all the genres as well. And predominantly what we look for is for artists, music creators only, who are at a crucial tipping point, which is what we've that term we've used quite frequently, and who have a national scope of interest as well, and want to come in for support between the arena of 5,000 to 15,000 to carry out a plan which would be achievable within the next 18 months. And that is basically our period of reporting. So we couldn't facilitate any projects that have a lead time of like 5 to 10 years. That's not something that we would do within the PPL Momentum. So there is a time frame, and we anticipate you're at a stage of your career that you've piqued the interest, you've exhausted all the resources within the nation of Wales, and you're moving on to the next step. The Wales PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales, which is what Anton briefly touched on, is for those who are at that sort of interim gap, who need that support, which is up to 5,000 for music creators and 2,000 for music industry professionals. And it is that timely support for on both instances where a music creator is at a point where they're still struggling to hit a scope within the nation through their music creation, and likewise through the industry professional and their endeavors. And this injection of cash could help them achieve their plans, which they would obviously articulate to us. And the deadlines for that, we've just opened up a deadline. I'm going to give the details of the deadline at the end, but there will be 2 deadlines within this PPL Momentum year, which runs from April to May, so April to March, sorry, next year. And there will be 2 opportunities for applicants to come in for that in the region. Again, I think the only thing I would like to add into kind of this segment is it's very important at that interim level of PPL Momentum Accelerator in the Wales nation to really dig in and articulate your markers for success, especially if you're dealing with genres which aren't particularly established, or they're completely new genres that you're building in the Cardiff underground scene and so on and so forth, or whatever. If it's completely new, there's even more of a necessity for you to define why it's important for you to have this injection of cash to achieve that level of growth. It's very dangerous for you to believe that externally us or the rest of the kind of the music industry has the ability to define your success or define where you're at in your career. As the experts and the creators of your genre and your scenes, we leave that we leave you with that autonomy to kind of define where you want that scene to go and how it should be shaped, kind of thing. So you do that within your application. We're rattling through pretty quickly because we're missing the guest, but I just wanted to sort of go and talk about the metrics of success again, Dave, if that's okay. But maybe from an accelerator level. I know we touched on big PPL momentum, and there's clearly been incredible success stories, especially from well-speaking artists as well, which is really encouraging. And I think that in itself sort of articulates that the artistry doesn't need to be touched for it to be deemed commercially viable. It's just, again, the music applicants defining where they need this to go and what they've done currently and why they are having difficulties achieving that. From that interim early emerging space of new young managers, new young agents, new young promotions, what are you seeing from their sort of anecdotal evidence when they're coming to you? The ones who maybe don't get signposted on to PPL momentum and they have to kind of work a little bit longer in that space. What are they sort of like wrestling with?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think one of them is that there's not really, I mean, and I don't, Arts Council have done great stuff for a long time with support, and for a lot of that time have been the only form of financial support to people within the music industry in Wales. But there's only so much money, and it can only go so far. And I think particularly when you're talking about industry professionals as opposed to artists, there's just a sense of, well, there isn't anything out there, so we've just got to plug along and make ends meet. And I mean, I'm sure everybody listening into this is in that situation, or certainly used to be in that situation where it is just a case of trying to make everything add up so that you can get by, because people don't generally get into the music industry because they think they're going to make millions out of it. They do it because they love being here. That's why we all work doing this stuff, is because it's a passion. So I think there's an element of that. I think there's an element of not realizing that there are things that are available. It's been particularly difficult as well, obviously, during the past 2 years with the pandemic, because we can't physically get out there and tell people. You haven't got shows where you're just chatting to people at the bar or whatever, and you can sort of let people know what you're doing. So it's a lot more reliant on people either looking for themselves or following the right people on Twitter to find that information. So I think there's a little bit of that, and I think that in itself then leads to a lack of confidence to put those applications in. I think there's often a sense of, oh, well, it's not really for me. And I think that's something especially you sort of hear when you're talking to, particularly when you're talking to professionals who work around. There's an amazing sort of rap, hip hop, grime scene in and around Cardiff at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely buzzing. There are so many artists coming through in that sort of field, you know, you've got like Lemfrek's been doing amazing stuff. Mace the Great is on the Mobile Uprising this year, and he's the IVW ambassador for Wales for this year. You know, you've got Sage Todd's out west, who's been doing stuff and has been like, he had a track that the FAW put all over the Welsh football team's promos for the game against Ukraine recently. Like it's coming from everywhere. There's great artists in North Wales, and there are lots of amazing rappers who are doing it in Welsh as well as doing it in English. And again, I think it's that, like, the people who are helping those guys and helping get them that leg up and putting the shows on and things like that. I don't think there's, because there never really has been anything there for them. There's not that sense of then looking for it. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that you know, with hopefully with Accelerator especially now, you know, we can do a better job of making sure people are aware that it's there and then getting people through it. And hopefully in the same way as, you know, when you were talking about, you might think that your what you do is so unique and so obscure maybe that it won't be considered for it. You know, I think Magugu is an amazing example of that. Anyone that hasn't heard him, look him up on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use. So he does a combination of English and Pidgin rap, which is like a local, I think it's a local Nigerian dialect. Mm-hmm. His stuff's amazing, and he is one of the hardest working people I've ever met. And he got funding for it, and I can tell you, you know, obviously we can't talk too much about the conversations that go on in panels, but everyone on that panel, as soon as they heard that stuff, fell in love with it. And what happened was he spelled out so clearly, despite the fact that he didn't have huge numbers on the sort of surface of things, he spelled out so clearly what that money was going to do for him and where it would take him, that it was one of the shortest conversations I think we've ever had around an artist from Wales, because everyone was just like, yeah, this just makes perfect sense. And he's amazing and he's great and he knows what he's doing. And it was because he had, I want to use these people and this is why I want to use them and this is where it's going to get me. And that, again, without wanting to labor that point too much, is so key behind it. It's telling that story of why you're asking for this and why that is going to help you get to a next level, whatever that might look like.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dave. Anton, I wanted to talk a little bit more also about the industry professional side of things, because I feel like this has been sort of the missing component, which when you sort of look at a lot of schemes historically, they've always concentrated on the music creator. And then we've sort of realized, well, what if the people around them aren't upskilled and knowledgeable about the arena that they're moving into as well? So the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales will provide £2,000 support for music industry professionals, but also holistic kind of industry support and the opportunity of mentoring also, which is fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit about your kind of I guess strategy behind what that can do for the Wales music industry, helping the people behind the music creators as well?
Funnily, I mean, Dave might be kind of better placed for this, just because I suppose what's interesting is, as an arts council, we support you know, the creative, the artists, I suppose, but we've been very aware of that lack of support, you know, that lack of industry support, whether it's, you know, through agents or managers or you know, publishers or whatever, however that manifests. Really, I suppose we're aware that there is a deficit in a way of that, but at the same time, it's kind of outside of our remit as an arts council generally to support that part of the industry. So I mean, you know, it sounds like, you know, it is quite, you know, reasonably small levels of funding through Accelerator, but, you know, hopefully there'll be, you know, enough opportunity there to support some industry professionals who can then really help to support the artists that we're looking to support. You know, it's a kind of it's a vital part of the ecology, really, and you know, we need to kind of ensure that support structure is there, so that, you know, when we can't pick that support structure up as an arts council, and neither can Creative Wales really do that. You know, we need to sort of support the development of the support structure for the artists, and that's kind of the thinking, really, I suppose, behind including industry professionals within the Accelerator Fund.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you, Anton. And I think obviously people watching this back will kind of see that there's a real beautiful consensus now as to where the issue lies and where the energy needs to go towards. Simon, when you've obviously had your both hats on as a music creator and then obviously someone supporting music creators, do you mind just sort of articulating from that perspective a trajectory coming up through the industry in Wales, what sort of challenges there were for you as someone working behind the scenes, helping music creators, and how did you even begin to upskill and gain more knowledge in that environment where there's no sort of formal training? It's not like you go somewhere to learn, like you can go somewhere to play guitar. It's like there isn't somewhere to go to get bookings or get venues or so on and so forth. How did you do that?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and it's something that I talk to people a lot in Wales about. Is like there seems to be a lack of, oh, maybe not a lack of, but certainly in the past there was a lack of infrastructure there for that, and for bands, I suppose. It was very much, especially I'm from Swansea, and it was very much a DIY scene across the board and across all genres. It was like you learn by doing. And I think that I've been lucky enough to get to the position that I am, where I am working actively in the music scene as a freelancer, as well as all my other things. But like, it's certainly a case of I've done it by just like doing it, just by going more. I've just got to learn by jumping two-footed into this. So I think that this opportunity to offer this financial support for industry professionals is amazing, and is going to do, you know, it's like Anton said, it's like the ecology of it. It's feeding that ecosystem in Wales of industry professionals and artists, because these industry professionals are going to help artists to get to the point where they can then get to momentum stage, and, you know, even helping them with their fund applications for Launchpad and understanding how the wider scene, not just in Wales, works. I think that's the most crucial thing as well, is that, you know, we're very much, I feel like in Wales it's very much a bubble, and it's great that it is, and it feels like a fantastic thing, but to understand, like, I'm still learning about how the wider world of music works outside of our bubble, and I will continue to learn by doing. But I think, yeah, the fact that there's an opportunity for people to get that leg up is going to do fantastic things for artists, for people that want to work in music. It's going to inspire loads of people to want to have a career in music. Yeah, it's good. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but yeah, learn by doing. But yeah, always nice to have that backing to get people doing, I suppose.
Brilliant. No, once again, spot on, Simon. Thank you very much. And just to kind of tie into that, that idea of the Wales Accelerator is almost attempting to support on a granular level what is actually happening in Wales in the music scene. So artists like Tsunami Magugu are kind of like they are typifying that you don't have to change your artistry drastically to try and fit whatever your perception is of the music scene, which is heavily London centric. You can just keep your essence from wherever part of Wales you're coming from and apply, and just have a really solid plan behind it. Would like to add as well, for the purpose of everyone watching this workshop, I mentioned before that the deadline for the PPL Momentum Fund is the 22nd of August, and the deadline for the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund, did I say that twice? I feel like I said that twice. So the PPL Momentum Fund is the 22nd of August, and the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales is also the 22nd of August. This workshop is to help you self-identify which of those schemes is the best fit for you. You cannot apply for both, I'm afraid. They are two separate schemes which are for two types of artists, and one is obviously for industry professionals that are at different stages of your career. So please take a little bit of time after this workshop, after you've had the Q&A, talk to friends, family who can give you an objective sort of a viewpoint of where you're at in your career. And also, probably doesn't get drilled home enough, that the PPL Momentum Fund is what's called a next step fund in the foundation, which means once you receive it, you won't be able to receive it again. That's very important if you're sort of staircasing your music career and you want to maybe use that PPL Momentum Fund support later on down the line, which is what some bands have done, some music creators have done. That's completely up to you. But I think that's important to mention, that you don't want to kind of come in prematurely and get that support, and then unfortunately when you really need it, you won't be able to kind of access it for that debut album, so to speak. So that's just something to bear in mind. Just to go over once again, the aims of the PPL Momentum Accelerator are to provide vital and timely financial support of up to £5,000, which will help talented artists and bands outside London to reach or get beyond early career tipping points, to enable artists and bands to become more invest ready in the future, to support regional industry infrastructure and access to team members so that artists, bands and industry professionals do not need to leave their region or nation to progress in their careers, provide access to industry-facing platforms, e.g. live platforms, radio and DSP access and industry interest, to provide knowledge and advice to enable music creators and industry professionals to generate income, build audiences and sustain careers, support a diverse range of music creators and industry professionals across the UK, support sustainable regional scenes with income generated staying in the area. So what I've just read there is sort of the generic aims of the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund, and then how they apply to Yorkshire, Liverpool City region, and in this case, Wales. They can be found on the website. Okay. I think we can probably jump into our Q&A if there's anyone in the panel that would like to ask any questions. As I've mentioned before, we have a translator to hand. So if you wanted to pose your question in the Welsh language, that can be translated for you. Just check the chat here. Okay.
I think one thing maybe just to add while Kwame is looking at that is that, you know, anyone that wants to have a chat about where they think they fit, or you know, just to have a bit more information about how these funds look and what they're for and what they can do and whether they fit with what your plans are, I'm always more than happy to have that conversation with anybody. My details will be available presumably somewhere on here, but I'm on david.ball@gov.wales. I'm on Twitter @daveball70. We're on Twitter @Creative Wales or @Cymru Greadigol and Gymraeg. If you want to send stuff through to us, and yeah, I'm more than happy to have a chat in person, on the phone, over Zoom, whatever you like, if that helps at all, just to give you an idea of whether things fit and what sort of thing we're looking for, and to help you look over applications before you submit them, if that's any help. So
okay, brilliant, thank you, Dave. And I'll make sure we'll get Dave to put his contacts into the chat box for you. Okay, so I'm just going through the questions here. We can start with this first one from Stephanie. With mentoring, how will Arts Council Wales facilitate this to be a productive, generative and equitable process? Do you want to touch on that, Antoine, or should I go for that one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Momentum Accelerator funding is very much a PRS scheme that we are kind of buying into, I suppose, and enabling that to be rolled out in Wales. I think the mentoring is specifically in relation to the industry professionals, isn't it, Kwame? And you know, PRS have you know, obviously got long experience in supporting people in that way. We, you know, as Kwame said earlier on, really, you know, there's very much a poislice. What's poislice in English? Like an emphasis. I couldn't think of the word. An emphasis on really, you know, supporting a diverse music sector. So I don't know, Kwame, maybe, you know, if you've got experience of how the mentoring process works within the Accelerator scheme.
So for the benefit of Stephanie, the mentoring scheme, because obviously we're using public money, will be putting out the feelers to sort of a broader range of applicants rather than a selection process, which has happened before in other Momentum sort of funds, so accelerator funds. So the industry professionals would come from a much broader spectrum and be able to sort of demonstrate from their own perspective the sort of the challenges that they're facing, as opposed to a scenario which could occur where you would have to have some sort of proximity to someone within the Wales music industry who could signpost you or advocate for you. This is kind of would answer more of that equitable process where we are able to kind of reach music industry professionals who may slip under the radar because they are operating in either geographically or genre-wise things which haven't got as much buzz, but they still operate in an exciting capacity. So I hope that answers your question, Stephanie. Just going to go into this one from Mason. Yep. So Mason has asked, can you go over the two applications again? I believe you're referring to the PPL Momentum Fund and the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund. And I apologize, sometimes I talk very fast and sometimes I get myself confused between the two. So the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund, which is what this workshop is for specifically Wales-based music creators and industry professionals. So you have to be Wales-based. That's the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund. The PPL Momentum Fund is UK-wide, and that is just for music industry professionals. The pot involved is a lot larger. That's up to £15,000 for just that music creator. And for the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in the Wales nation, that is up to £5,000 for the industry professional and £2,000 for, I got that wrong now, £5,000 for the music creator and £2,000 for the industry professional. I'm really sorry, Mason. The good thing is that this is being recorded, so you can just rewind back and catch the bits where I don't fluff it, okay? So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Let's have a look. Okay. So, thank you for your time this evening. Is it specifically for artists only or all music creators? Okay. I think I understand what you mean there. Yes, so all music creators. So if you're a producer, because yes, I have seen people struggle with the term artist because they may not self-define as an artist if they class himself as a music creator. So I think music creator is probably the more accurate way of defining who is eligible. If you are making music, but maybe you don't see yourself as front of stage and whatnot, then you are eligible for the PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales. I think artists might be a bit sort of intimidating for someone from a maybe like a visibility perspective. So I guess within that definition, you would still have to obviously define your plan as a music creator and what sort of tipping points that you're wrestling with. Okay, thank you. Okay. If an artist has already been supported by International Showcase Fund and Power Up, would we still be allowed to apply for this fund? That is a very good question, and I think it's more in regards to the Power Up dynamic. A Power Up grantee, currently they are allowed to apply for Momentum and Power Up, and so they're sort of similar pots of money. I would need to still find out if we are making that same sort of allowance for the Accelerator Fund. I'm assuming you don't mean they've had all three, as in they've maybe had one or two, but I think you would have to maybe send an email into us at info@prsfoundation.com and just maybe just flesh out that scenario a little bit more. If they've had ISF and Power Up and they were likely to get Momentum Accelerator, would that be allowed? We could maybe answer that a bit more in depth. Okay, thank you. Okay, there's questions here from Lisa. This is for Adarin. I hope I pronounced that right. I was wondering, for the Momentum Accelerator, is recording an EP the right sort of goal for that fund? I assume it's the same for most artists. Studio costs are by far the thing I need the most help with. Thanks for the panel, really helpful. Can I chuck this over to you, Dave?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Adarin. So
Adarin.
you weren't too far off.
Nearly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, going back to the sort of the earlier points you were making, I think it's slightly different for every artist that's applying on where they sit. I think with the style of music that you do, Lisa, I think that would probably make sense. I think for you going in for big momentum, to borrow Kwame's phrase, for the EP would probably be considered to be too early for that level of funding for the main Momentum Fund. And I think that's exactly the type of situation really where we see Accelerator fit in, is for artists who, like yourself, have, excuse the pun, but have momentum behind them. I know your last couple of singles have done really well. Obviously, you signed on with the guys at Club now, but the next step of what you're looking to do with going into record an EP, you probably don't want to sort of almost waste your opportunity of getting that one shot at momentum on doing an EP. You probably want to hold that back for when you do the full record. So I think it would probably make a lot of sense to look at doing that, and to just reiterate again Simon's point earlier, about the plan. It's really going to be a case, and that's going to be the same for both funds. It's really a case of making sure that it's made very clear when you put your application in that the funding going towards the EP, and you're absolutely right that the cost of studio time and producing and mastering and mixing and everything else associated to it is where most people are looking for the costs for these funds. That sort of clear sign of that funding to do this EP will help to get you from where you are now, which is here, to where you want to be in 6 to 12 months, which is there. And then this time next year, maybe you and I are talking about putting in an application for Big Momentum, which is now what I'm going to call it all the time, Kwame.
I should have trademarked it. Brilliant. Thank you, Dave. Can I get you to chime in, please, as well, Simon?
I'll do my best.
Terrible timing, I know. Thank you.
It's all good. I've bribed her with food and I've changed a nappy. It's all go here. It's mad. Yeah, no, I'd agree with Dave. I think that it's definitely driving home that point of making sure that you've got a really well thought out plan, and like, you know, and plotting where certain funds can fall within that plan. Yes, it is. Yeah, sorry, I think, yeah, totally, I echo what Dave said. And yeah, make sure you've got like a good support network around you, a good idea of where you want to go as a band, and especially if you're in a band as well. It's one thing that I try and get across to people as well, and it's something that bands don't tend to have. And I'm talking like if you're working within, like, you know, multiple members within your project, is like define success within your band as well, and make sure that everyone's on the same page. Because if opportunities start knocking and you get the opportunity to get big financial support, you know, I've known on a few occasions where it's happened and someone goes, oh, actually, I don't want to do this with my life, I want to prioritize this. So have that question with you know, the people that you're working with, and define success and define what, you know, where you want to go. Because I think that varying the levels of that vary from artist to artist. But yeah, make sure that it's you know, what think about what you're applying for, and think about why and when you're doing it. I'll hammer that home.
Brilliant. I think that is a really a poignant kind of thing that you mentioned, because me and myself and Dave, I don't know if you remember this application, Dave. I think there was a Welsh band who had a pivot in sound in their sort of their application, and it almost sort of speaks to that thing you was mentioning, Simon, where the band have to sort of really commit to where they want to be with their sound, because almost if you have those sort of creative changes, you lose your momentum, and then you can't really justify that this new iteration of the band can go anywhere, because it's unproven and untested. So I found that quite educational from my perspective, kind of overseeing that decision panel, whereby I can't remember who the band was, obviously, to kind of keep it under wraps and privacy. It was a case of they had done really, really well, but for whatever reason, and they're well within their rights to, they wanted to do something else. But it's almost like now they are starting, I guess, from ground zero again. So it is very important that you sort of map out your sounds, where you want to take it, the formation of the band, everything like that. And I know it's very tough as a music creator myself, just taking yourself out of that purely creative space and thinking a lot more strategically with your plan. Because again, with whether it's the PPL Momentum Fund or Momentum Accelerator, you actually are there to sort of convince other people that it's going to happen. There's probably no doubt in your mind that you're going to achieve your aims, but you need to convince the people around you that this money is going to be better with you than someone else in Wales.
I think again, it's telling that story and making it make sense again, isn't it? It's sort of, you know, this is what we want to do and why we want to do it, and why supporting us is going to make this big difference. You know, and that's really the key to it, because the people in that room, you know, outside of, you know, within Wales, perhaps, you know, it would be me and maybe one other person, on depending on who the panelists are, the actual decision-making panelists are, on that any given session. The likelihood is there's only one, maybe two people on that panel who know you and have have that background of who you are and what you've done, and you know, your kind of you know, your life cycle, I guess. So you've got to tell that story and sort of say, well, this is what we were doing, and we've gone from, you know, supporting acts in 50 cap venues to now we're headlining Club of Bach at 350 cap, and you know, to get up to now doing sort of academy size venues, and doing that outside of Wales, we need a bit of funding to be able to go and make an album with a producer who can make it sound that little bit more polished and that little bit more radio friendly, and do some A&R on it, and get a promoter that can do it, get us shows across England, or can get us on a support bill like Nia Wynn had, going on and supporting Paul Weller or whatever it might be. Although that's quite a high bar to go for, to be fair, jumping onto an arena tour. But you know, it is that kind of thing. It's it's jumping on, and you know, how are you, how is this going to help you, and telling that story to people who work on the basis they've never heard of you and they have no idea who you are, and going from there. Sorry, Ant, I jumped in there.
No, I mean, you kind of touched on it a bit then, Dave, as well. Just, you know, that, you know, I think a lot of artists, obviously, the you know, recording, as you know, they said in the question, is, you know, is an expensive thing to do, or can be, but it's not, it doesn't have to be the first thing you think about. I suppose that there are other ways of also, you know, being supported through the fund, and it might be about promotion, it might be about design work, it might be you know, making a video, it might be you know, working with a plugger or a producer, as you said, Dave. I think just kind of think more broadly as well about that kind of developmental support that you might be able to bring in, to that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, you know, that working with other professionals who can support the development of your art and your practice.
I think that's a brilliant point, Anton, because I feel like the creativity, rather, it doesn't have to begin and end with the actual creation of music. You can be creative in your rollout, with your the kind of the dissemination of your product. Again, you just have to justify why a conceptual piece or a specific video is the reason why it's best to sort of kind of staircase you into that space. And it might make complete sense if your whole artistry is tied within a certain mystique, and you have to kind of keep that consistency of your brand. But again, I can't stress enough, we really rely on you thinking long and hard and being convincing in your application, and to make that case. Just wanted to touch on a point I think Stephanie mentioned about kind of the equitable, how equitable the process is. We will endeavour also to have a balance of advisors on our panel who are from the Wales music scene, who understand the sort of the metric of success in Wales, and they haven't sort of been, I guess, confused by the barometer set by London as a kind of an overarching definition of where musicians are at. They can read what someone should be at the level for Momentum Accelerator in Wales, so we have those on board, and so we will always sort of endeavour to kind of have diversity through our advisors on our panelists as well. So that should hopefully kind of provide you a bit of confidence in how the scheme is run. Just going to touch on Ashley's question here. Ashley's asked, would you say that it's better for the application to focus on one part of a campaign, for example, only focus on wanting to record an EP, or is it worth, or does it help to suggest that the funding will go towards recording an EP and then also be used to provide a full PR campaign? Is it better to only focus on one specific part? What's your views on that, Simon?
I mean, in terms of a launchpad thing, it can be it's kind of flexible. Yes, no. So hang on, I'm just going to turn my camera off so I can give her some attention. It's a case of, like, you know, we're, as a panelist, and when I'm sitting in on the panel, we're looking at value for money. So if you're demonstrating with the money that you're asking, you're going to get a load of stuff for that. That's obviously going to look a lot more favorable to us on the panel. But kind of going definitely back to Dave's point in terms of why and where is this specific thing that you're asking for, where is it going to get you, and why is it important that that's getting you there now? There's so many occasions where I read applications and have read applications of, you know, artists and bands that I'm working with, you know, that are asking for PRS money, where I'm like, you're literally just asking for money for something. And you can see those applications a mile off. And it's the one, like you say, the ones where you can clearly see this is going to get you from A to B in a really cool, creative way, are the ones that fly through. And especially going back to Launchpad, it's like a classic example is a band last year asked for, I think, 400 quid for guitar cases because they'd been invited to play some international shows. And that's like brilliant for us, because it's like we're hitting, it's great value for money in terms of we're helping them get to this amazing opportunity, and we're getting their instruments there safely. So we're playing a really vital part in getting them there. But they've really just thought about like, yeah, we're doing this, and to make it a lot easier for us to do it, you're giving us this small pot of money to get there. I can't really touch upon the decisions maybe made at a PRS momentum level, but yeah, certainly at a Launchpad level, it can be as fluid and as creative as you want. Like we've had people apply for music video shoots, for whole PR campaigns, to, you know, studio and PR campaigns. And yeah, it's always nice seeing either a fully fledged plan or where a specific activity will fit within your fully fledged plan. So yeah, that kind of answers it from a Launchpad point of view.
Thank you, Simon. Anton?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to just, personally, I think if you were just to apply, I want to record an EP, the question would be, so what then? You know, where does it go? Who hears it? How do they hear it? You know, what's the market? So, you know, depending on the level of funding, there may not be enough available to do a whole campaign, you know, promotional campaign. But I think we would want to see some evidence that you're saying, okay, we really want to record this EP, and this is our plan for how we're going to promote it, how we're going to ensure that you know, that it gets heard, that people are able to access it, and that there's maybe some radio plugging or some kind of promotional activity that goes alongside it. Otherwise, it can sort of feel like it's in isolation and not really, you know, for anything. So I think it's important to have that connection between creating the work and your audience, and you know, how are people going to hear you?
That's a very good point. You touched on, Anton, about how realistic and the applications coming in for PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund have to be, because what we don't want to fall into a situation is that we fund someone that still has to maybe get other pots of money before they can even really get going and start. Then that obviously affects the lead time as with when they can actually start their project. So I think it's a brilliant scenario that Simon mentioned with the guitar cases, because it probably infused so much confidence in the panel, because they know that that's going to be sorted, and once that's sorted, they can start their project. But something to bear in mind with people coming in for either PPL Momentum Fund or PPL Momentum Accelerator Fund in Wales is that if you've costed something in a really in the stratosphere, really ambitiously, that still relies on other pots of money, other support, it might read as though, well, we don't know when this is going to start yet, because we don't know when you're going to get those other pots of money, because from the PRS Foundation perspective, we can't support 100% of production costs. So we always anticipate your your own personal contributions, whether they're from your own sort of gigs or support from maybe an independent label or so on and so forth. But if it's looking like that unconfirmed amount is still on the horizon, then that could obviously affect the confidence the panel might have on maybe supporting you. So that's just something to kind of to bear in mind, that your plan has to be, don't think of it as small, think of it as being realistic. It's not small, it's realistic, it's actionable. And I think the moment you've got that actionable plan, you can take that elsewhere and carry it on. There's probably a whole wealth of opportunities that came from the gig where they was able to travel on the basis that they had the guitar cases kind of thing. So just thinking forward there.
I think there's a little bit as well of that case of, you know, we're going to do this, whether that's, you know, in Ashley's scenario, you know, we're going to make an EP, because really what we want to see is you're going to do that anyway. That's in the plan, and that's part of your plan. But if you're able to give us $5,000, then it means we can do it in this studio instead, or we can spend 10 days rather than 4 days in the studio, and we can use this producer, and we can attach an actual PR campaign to it by going to, and it's always great as well, if it's always much better if you can say, we want to do that campaign with this company or this individual, and we want to do it with them because they've worked with these artists in the past, or because they've done a little bit of work with us before and we saw a big spike in our streaming numbers, or the ticket sales for our show, whatever it might be, because it just shows that you've put that thought into it and you're really saying, you know, look, we love what we're doing and we're going to do what we do because we love doing it and we want to do it. But if you can give us this little leg up, it means we can take something that we're hoping will be really good and make it something that's going to be absolutely brilliant and is going to make us take that leap. And that's what the panels are always looking for. And I really wanted to get in as well, kind of what Kwame was saying. Every single panel I've sat on over all the years I've been doing this, when someone puts in a budget and they've just got recording, and it doesn't say who's producing it, it doesn't say which studio you want to use, it doesn't say how many days you're in there for, it's like, it's just red flags everywhere. You know, the more detail you can put in that about why the figure you've got there. If you just got recording time $10,000, like, the panel just turn off straight away. It doesn't mean you won't get it, because if you've got a great application, maybe you'll still get it, and it'll be caveated with, we need to have a conversation before we commit to the money. But if you can say, you know, we want to go and do it in Longwave Studio working with Romesh, and we're going to spend 10 days there, and this is the day rate of it, and that's why it's coming to this amount, then it just looks so much better. It looks like you're so much more well prepared for receiving a big amount of money. Even if it is 3, 4, 5,000, you know, they're not huge monies in the great scheme of the world at the moment, but it's a lot of money to give to a band. It's a punt on every band and every artist that gets money from these things. And you want to make it look as little of a punt and as little of a long shot as you possibly can. And that's the absolute key to it. Make it seem like this is an absolute nailed on, we've got to do this, because why wouldn't we? There's no reason not to do it. We've got to give them the money, and make it as easy as possible for that panel to just say yes.
I think I'd agree in a launchpad sense as well. The ones where, you know, if people are going for PR campaigns, they're going, we want to work with this PR company because XYZ, or like, again, the guitar cases, they were like, we want this specific guitar case that fits this guitar because that's what we've got. It's like, you know, and again, studio time, music videos, if you're identifying who you're working with, it's immediately just like, okay, yeah, cool, they're actually on it and they have a plan, rather than, yeah, like there are hundreds of applications I've read over the years where it has, like Dave said, music video or studio time. Yeah, we're left to imagine what and who that would be with.
That's brilliant. And I think it just speaks to my own personal experiences of walking into Sainsbury's and I don't have a shopping list, and the sort of the kind of careless spending which kind of occurs from that sort of lack of preparation and just coming home and just realizing that I don't have the ingredients to make what I need to make. So if you have a structured list where you know what's coming in, what's going out, where it's coming from, why you even need it, and that speaks to both the music creators and the industry professionals as well. It would be good for you, before you put in your application, to identify who that mentor is in Wales that you feel could take you to that next step. Who do you want to learn from? Who do you feel that could give you the expertise from that genre, from that gender, from that maybe from that you've identified from a certain socio-economic background that you feel understands you and your journey. Start to think of them now, because that will shape your application and make it much more impactful.
I feel like there's an overarching theme across everything is sustainability. It's like making sure that you, as a project and an artist, that whatever you're applying for isn't just like a flash in the pan. Isn't it? Oh yeah, this would be a nice idea to do this. Wouldn't it be nice to just record an album in our favorite studio? It's like, yeah, but then what? And like, how is this? Again, yeah, I'd say like think about the sustainability of you financially as a project in terms of your plan, everything. Because yeah, that always looks really favorable when people are reading applications as well.
Brilliant, Simon. Okay, thank you. I think this is going to be the last one, and then we're going to wrap it up. This question's from Stephanie, and it says, it's a bit of a tricky one. Given Spotify are a partner, is it okay for music creators to be looking to showcase via, e.g. Resonate, Co-op, or Ampled? If this is for reasons the panel see are sound economically, so it's part of a critical pathway to get there, or must this move come via Spotify? Just to know. Does anyone Dave, do you have any take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's likely to be an issue. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Kwame, but I don't think Spotify sit on the panels with us.
No.
You know, it all comes back, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but it all comes back to it being a really strong story and a good application, and providing us with good reasons to put the funding into it. And as long as that's there, there's no there's no preference given to who you're working with, what platforms you want to release stuff on. You know, whether you particularly don't want to work with certain companies or certain individuals. It probably is worth knowing as well that on the occasion, and Kwame and the team at PRS do their very best to make sure that there aren't conflicts of interest anytime with panelists. But on the occasion when there is a situation where somebody on the panel is friendly with or works with an applicant or the label that an applicant are on or anything like that, those individuals leave the conversation and aren't involved at all in the decision-making process of that. They don't even see the application, and I can vouch for that because I've been in those rooms and seen that happen. So you know, there isn't any sort of lean in either way on that. I think, you know, as long as it made a lot of sense, then I think we'd be more than happy to still do it, and they wouldn't have a say in whether we did or didn't. They just have to like it.
Brilliant, thank you. Hope that's answered the question for you, Stephanie. Yeah, I think that is it. We're going to wrap up here, and once again,
sorry,
sure.
I don't think we kind of. Sorry, just to address there was another question that Stephanie had written about support, about developing the application, and that's from an Arts Council perspective. Obviously, again, it's very much a PRS Foundation scheme. So we wouldn't offer direct support in putting together an application for Accelerator. I don't know, Kwame, if you have the capacity to support applicants through an application in that way.
Yeah, I mean, between myself and my grants coordinator, Georgia, who works alongside me, we can answer sort of generalized questions, but obviously we can't do any sort of hand-holding throughout the whole application process. But we will try our best, as always, to kind of identify that this is a new scheme. There's going to be new questions and queries, so we will try our best to kind of answer those questions. Again, the email would be info@prsfoundation.com, and just put the name of the scheme in the header.
Yeah, so just to be really clear again, it's so the funding doesn't go through the Arts Council's funding portal at all. It has to be directed at PRS Foundation.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Anton. So we're going to wrap up here. I'd like to thank the panel guests for taking part in this workshop event, and a big thank you also to our translator who's worked alongside us doing live translations. This PPL Momentum Accelerator workshop was recorded and will be made available on the PRS Foundation YouTube channel for you to rewatch. I would like to remind everyone that the PPL Momentum Accelerator Wales deadline is on the 22nd of August, 2022. Also, the PPL Momentum deadline shares the same date and is also on the 22nd of August, 2022. For any further queries which we're unable to answer in this workshop, please contact the foundation at info@prsfoundation.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Sorry,
Thank you.
sorry about my
Yeah.
toddler juggling.
Oh, not at all. Lovely to have you with us.
Thanks, Kwame.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Anton. Thanks, Simon.